All right, let's talk about the American Civil War. I know, it's one of the biggest moments in the U.S. history. But you know what? The real reasons it all went down are way more complicated than you might think. So get ready, because we're diving into the ultimate cheat sheet on what actually ripped the country in two.
So I'm going to take a guess. You've probably always heard it was just about slavery, right? And look, slavery is absolutely at the heart of it. It's the central issue, no question, but it's not the entire story. To really get a handle on this, you got to see all the other things that were throwing fuel on the fire.
Okay, so here's the roadmap. We're looking at count 'em, five main causes that just kept piling up until the whole thing snapped. We've got slavery and its expansion, the big fight over states' rights, this thing called sectionalism, a bunch of compromises that just didn't work, and the final straw, Lincoln getting elected.
Let's start with the big one, the foundation of the whole conflict, slavery and the fight over its expansion. For decades, this wasn't just some political issue. It was like the raw, exposed nerve of the entire country. Now, this wasn't just a moral question. It was a straight-up power struggle. I mean, think about it. Every new state that joins the Union gets more votes in Congress. So the real fight wasn't just free or slave. It was, who's going to control the future of America, the North or the South?
So, how did the South even defend keeping and expanding slavery? Well, that leads us right into our second cause, the huge, angry debate over states' rights. This was all about who really calls the shots.
The argument basically went like this. Southern states said that the federal government in Washington had no right to tell them what to do, especially when it came to their laws about slavery. They believed state power should be stronger than federal power. But for the North, this just sounded like a weak excuse to protect an evil system.
And that deep, deep divide brings us to cause number 3, sectionalism. By the middle of the 1800s, the North and the South weren't just two parts of the same country. They were basically two different worlds, with completely opposite economies and values.
And you can see the clash right here, clear as day. The North, all about industry, factories, and immigrant labor. They loved high tariffs to protect their businesses. But the South, totally different world. It was an agricultural powerhouse running on cotton and, crucially, the labor of enslaved people. And they absolutely hated those tariffs because it made everything they bought more expensive. Their economic goals weren't just different, they were on a collision course.
Now, for years and years, politicians in Washington tried to just patch things up. They cooked up one compromise after another to try and keep the peace between the North and South. But really, they were just putting flimsy Band-Aids on a massive wound. And every single time one of those deals fell apart, things got even worse.
I mean, just look at this timeline of failure. Back in 1820, the Missouri Compromise drew a literal line across the map to separate free and slave areas. Fast forward to 1854, and the Kansas-Nebraska Act just erased that line, saying settlers could decide for themselves, which, by the way, led to total bloodshed in Bleeding Kansas. And the final nail in the coffin for compromise, the 1857 Dred Scott decision. The Supreme Court basically said the government had no power to stop slavery anywhere. Each broken deal was another step towards the edge of a cliff.
And that brings us to the final spark that lit the whole powder keg, the election of a guy named Abraham Lincoln. For the South, this was it. This was the point of no return.
The year is 1860. Abraham Lincoln gets elected president. His new Republican Party was built on one huge idea, stopping slavery from spreading any further. So for the South, his win wasn't just a political loss. It felt like a direct attack on their entire economy and way of life.
And get this, here's a mind-blowing fact for you. They didn't even wait for him to move into the White House. South Carolina was out the door in December 1860, just a month after the election. 6 more states followed before Lincoln even gave his first speech as president. That's how big of a trigger this was.
Okay, let's wrap this all up in a neat little package. Time for your Civil War cheat sheet. And hey, if you're studying for something like the GED, you're going to want to listen up. This is the key takeaway.
So here's the big GED tip. If you ever see a question about this, remember, you can't pin the Civil War on just one thing. It was like a perfect storm. You know, you had the massive moral and political crisis of slavery, which was then supercharged by the fight over states' rights, and that huge economic clash between two regions that just couldn't see eye to eye anymore.
So, now I gotta turn it over to you. We've laid out all the pieces. Which of these 5 causes do you think was the biggest single spark? Was it the economic fight, that Dred Scott decision, Lincoln's election? Let me know what you think. Drop your guess in the comments below.
This was a conflict that was brewing for decades, with every single one of these issues just adding more and more pressure until the whole thing finally exploded into war in 1861. I really hope this breakdown made it all click. If it did, do me a favor and hit that like button, and make sure you subscribe for more quick explainers like this one. See you next time.